Hi, I'm Lucas with Hometown Hero. Thank you for joining us this week. Today we have Castañeda from Longbow Partners. He's actually a partner there, been a lobbyist for almost 30 years now.
Yep.
And he is an amazing person that we work with. This is now our second session working with Tris. We're thrilled to work with him. And today we're going to chat with him and get an update on what's going on in the session and kind of what we can expect from here. Thanks for joining us. Tris, if you could, give us a little bit of your background on how'd you get into lobbying, sort of what have you done over the last 30 years in lobbying, and sort of, how'd you get to be sort of this powerhouse in Texas that you are?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. It's really an odd story because I don't think anybody decides, you know what, I think I'm going to go up and be a lobbyist. But having worked with elected officials for a long time, I volunteered for my first campaign at 16. I've always been oriented toward making a difference and understanding the intersection between government, regulation, and business. And so I found my way through there, having worked at the municipal level. At the state level, I ran some presidential campaigns and decided to come back to Texas, where I'm from, and work representing the interests of businesses, associations, and nonprofits before the Texas legislature.
Tris, for everybody watching, what exactly is lobbying and how does it work?
Well, there's a lot of different opinions about what lobbying is. Those of us that are in the profession would explain it as very specialized actors who get hired by businesses to help communicate their message to a very specific audience. And that audience is the legislative branch, which includes both the House and the Senate, the governor's office, which is the executive branch, and then many times state agencies when they start to put together rulemaking to implement the very minute details of what statute might be enacted.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, for example, on our issue that we are currently facing, we know that there's a variety of different opinions out there. There are urban members, there are rural members, Democrats and Republicans, and each one of them brings a unique viewpoint to the problem. Some people don't even think there's a problem, but somebody put the turtle on the fence post.
Yeah.
And so that happens in our business with some frequency. And what the people in the lobby do is they help work with clients, help them frame their message in the right way, deliver it to the right people in the right sequence so that we end up with a better policy result at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's been very surprising the more that we as a company get involved in politics, how much strategy is actually involved in it. It's pretty incredible.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it has become with social media, with direct mail campaigns, with the way that elections run. So electeds have to go out, they have to raise money, they have to convince enough voters, at least 50 plus one, to be reelected to serve, and managing the variety of different viewpoints from perspectives, whether you're a small business owner, whether you are a student, if you are in a profession like a licensed professional counselor, and there are bills that are introduced that impact your ability to deploy your practice.
Yeah.
In a manner that you think is appropriate and that best serves the public and your consumers and patients, that becomes an issue. And a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. And one of the roles of the lobby is to help bring businesses before the right audience, but in addition to that, to help translate this black box of the sausage-making process that tends to be politics in a discernible way so that folks can help shape the outcomes when the legislature comes into town.
Yeah. Tris, we know there's a ton going on this session. Can you give us an idea of sort of what you're looking at and kind of keep us up to date with what's going on?
Absolutely. I think you're right. And first of all, I want to I appreciate the question because not a lot of folks have shown the leadership, have put the resources there, and are trying to coalesce an industry that right now is facing several challenges out there. There are two bills in particular that I think, and I know that you are aware, but that maybe a broader group of folks may not be, and that's one is Senate Bill 264 by Senator Charles Perry, Republican from Lubbock, and one is House Bill 4238 by Click, also a Republican and a nurse from the Metroplex area. These two bills seek to ban the sale of consumable hemp, which, as you know, will have a ripple effect not only to small business owners, growers, the public who consumes.
Also a massive amount of tax revenue for Texas.
Not to mention the jobs and the indirect tax benefits that go along with people that are employed in this industry. It's curious how the policy grounding in this ban can be so confused with the growth trajectory that's going on in this industry. Ever since the Farm Bill passed, there are specific provisions that say you cannot stop the interstate commerce clause. So the only thing a ban would accomplish would be essentially to penalize Texas businesses.
Well, they actually did that with the smokable hemp bill, if I'm not mistaken, to where out-of-state manufacturers can ship product into Texas, but you can't manufacture smokable hemp products in Texas. So they're benefiting out-of-state companies and hurting Texas businesses, which doesn't make any sense to me.
It's precisely on point. And again, I think, I know that there's some litigation surrounding that, but at the end of the day, as a policymaker, one of the challenges that we have is helping inform folks that are looking at this to maybe take a more responsible policy approach and to come up with a framework that provides some reasonable regulations so that, you know, consumable hemp products are safe for the public to consume, that they have gone through a full panel test, that there's appropriate age gating, that this is not something that ends up where it shouldn't. These are adult products.
In House Bill 1325 that was passed in 2019 in Texas really set the groundwork for all of this. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in these bills, especially some of the bad bills that are being introduced, it's already covered in 1325. 1325 was very comprehensive.
That's an excellent point. We seem to be relitigating many of the same conversations and discussions that we've had back then. I know that through your leadership and efforts and resources, the folks that I'm working with on the lobby side are advancing the gap areas between 1535 and things that have come to evolve as of now. 1325. Yeah, we went House Bill 1325. So that we can put together a safer, but again, reasonable, so that we're not harming Texas businesses. And therein lies the challenge. However, I think we do have a lot of friends. We've been making connections over at the Capitol. I think there is a high degree of interest in not only the hemp legislation, but also with the compassionate use program. And so we're a little past the halfway mark right now. And I think
it's interesting. I was talking with some veteran friends of mine the other day, and one of them told me, he said the problem with the compassionate use program in Texas, specifically around veterans, is they don't have insurance that covers it. So therefore they have to buy their own products because the VA only prescribes opioids. They don't prescribe cannabis products. And so a lot of the veterans are finding the cannabis products are more preferable to the opioids, but there is no insurance coverage. The VA won't help them on it, so they're having to buy it on their own. if they have to buy it through the compassionate use program, because of the regulations in effect, it's very, very expensive. And our products are substantially cheaper. And so there's even allowing people sort of this qualifies them for the compassionate use program in Texas, they still have to buy the product. It's not just given to them. We're a little bit different in a lot of ways. We give out a ton of products. We put our products in more hands of veterans than probably anybody in the country that I know of that has anything to do with cannabis. So is the opposition that we're seeing right now, do you think it's from a prohibitionist standpoint? Is that really the root of this?
You know, I've heard that repeated more than a handful of times over at the Capitol. The prohibitionist, the ban.
Cannabis has been illegal. I say cannabis, hemp and marijuana have essentially been illegal in Texas for over 100 years. And we're just now at the beginning of sort of starting to figure this out. So it seems like there is some still sort of old prohibitionist tendencies with some of the politicians that are, you know, coming up against this and trying to wrap their head around like cannabis actually being legal in Texas.
Yeah, Texas is, as you know, a very conservative state.
Yeah.
There is not one statewide office holder that is not a Republican, and they currently control the majority in both the House and the Senate.
Yeah.
But let me also say that there's a lot of Republicans who understand the benefits that have yet to be explored from the extract of the cannabis plant. Yeah. Especially all of the cannabinoids that are associated with hemp, which, as you know, are legally derived based on the federal farm bill.
Yeah.
And so, you know, again, part of the challenge that we have is a lack of information and confusion and hysteria, frankly, over cannabis and the benefits that it can be delivered to consumers.
Yeah. So, Tris, what are we doing to counter 264 and 4238 right now?
That's a good question. The lobby team is in communications with the authors. One of the big problems that we see is the drafting of the term synthetic. It's overbroad and would result in some very adverse consequences. And our hope is that, you know, with the expertise of chemists and others, that we can come in and help modify that.
Yeah, we're seeing that all over the country right now. The words synthetic and synthesis are being manipulated, and people are literally trying to change the definitions of those words to try and impact our industry. So luckily, it's a pretty weak fight, I guess if you want to call it. It's a pretty weak strategy. So I think it should be fairly easy to overcome, but it is annoying that we're seeing that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're not going to stop the opponents for whatever reason, whether they're prohibitionist in nature or they feel like they're on the right side of the angels on this. It is about education, and it is about us helping tell the story that, look, here's the scientifically grounded facts between synthesis and synthetic, and we're going to try to work with the authors to amend those bills so that it doesn't result in legislation that would be very detrimental to the industry. We also have, as you know, another approach, which is a regulatory bill, House Bill 4439 by Joe Moody, which would set up a more responsible regulatory scheme. He has the definition that we are seeking of synthetic. But in addition to that, he sets up a lot of other things that help protect businesses as well as the consumers. And I want to go back to especially one of the things that you had mentioned relative to the veterans community and being able to access products that help them, especially when there seems to be an overprescription of opioids. Yeah. This is
we're still seeing
crisis.
We're still hearing about it from people going to the VA.
And I hear that at the Capitol as well. And so I think there's a lot of members that are sympathetic.
It's disappointing
to that, and that's another area that I think as we close in past the halfway mark, to seek specific changes to some of the bills that we would prefer not pass,
Yeah.
versus bills that we can support as an industry, because it does help create opportunities for further economic investment in the space, to help protect the jobs that are here, the tax base, in addition to the people who benefit from use of the products.
And supporting Texas businesses.
Absolutely. Because again, we're coming full circle on that interstate commerce question. The only thing that we would be doing with a complete ban would be
Sending all the business out of state.
hurting Texas businesses. In addition, one of the other adverse impacts of a ban is it will create a very robust illicit market. Take a look at something like fentanyl, which is banned.
Yeah.
But my goodness, seems like they're making bus
everywhere.
And again, these economic lessons we hope to be able to communicate to members of the legislature so that they can get their heads around a regulatory scheme that is responsible, that protects Texas businesses, versus a ban that will do nothing except for benefit out-of-state companies selling in and creating that illicit market.
Yeah, and I've even heard stories now of actual like street-grade illegal marijuana being laced with fentanyl. So it's not being regulated, it's not being tested, there is no full panel testing, there's no COA. So by getting rid of these products, we're literally just putting this entire industry in the hands of people that don't have a concern for the people using the products. They're not going to go out of their way to spend extra money to make sure they're safe. It's kind of a mess. So I firmly believe, and I think a lot of people do, the alternative to having Texas businesses, work within this industry and do the best they can for the consumers is vastly different than getting rid of this industry and putting it back in the hands of, essentially the cartels and, other bad actors that just don't care about people and are just trying to rip money out of them in whatever way possible. And if that means putting highly toxic illegal drugs on marijuana and selling it, they're going to do it.
Unfortunately, the market will find a way, and I think the work that Hometown Hero is doing relative to providing an alternative to that approach through a responsible regulatory framework makes eminent sense, and it's our job to make sure that the members of the legislature understand that kind of trade-off, but further, that folks in the industry can get involved.
Well, that begs my next question of, so for the businesses and for the consumers both, how do they help us in this fight within Texas? How is their voice heard? How do they impact the legislative session in the best way possible? So, we've got a bunch of people watching that constantly are asking us, how do we help you guys do this? What can we tell them from your perspective? What's the best way for them to help us get the result that we want in the legislative session?
I'm reminded, that's a great question, and I'm reminded of Margaret Mead, who said, never underestimate the power of a handful of citizens being able to change the world. In fact, that is the only thing that ever has. And so oftentimes what it takes is hearing from constituents. One of the most important relationships that an elected official has is with members of their own community that can either vote for them or vote for someone else. And I know that in my experience working with folks up in the legislature, when a constituent calls, it really does matter. And I think that the industry, it's starting to take off. The trajectory is on the right path. But for these policy challenges, and I would encourage folks, and I know that on your website, you have access to a thing as who represents me, so that people who may not have been engaged before in the political process can go online and find out who their state rep and state senator is, and what we need.
So that's who they're looking for. They're looking for the state representative and the state senator.
Exactly.
And is it better to call or email?
Both work.
I've heard staffers say that the calls are more impactful than the emails.
They definitely can be. It depends on the office and the person delivering the message. Speaking out in favor of
one thing for anybody real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's very, very important if you're calling your representative or you're calling your senator it's very, very important that you're extremely polite with them. Even if you don't
Absolutely.
agree with them, even if you don't like them, you're trying to get them to do something for you, and it's extremely important that you aren't aggressive with them, you aren't mean to them. You should be talking to them as if they're a friend, and you're trying to get them to do something, with you.
I agree 100%. And therein lies sometimes the challenges with a phone call
Yeah.
versus when you put something in writing and it's a set message,
Yeah.
and it is vote against Senate Bill 264 because it will do the following things.
Yeah.
And so, but to those that are interested, and keep that advice in mind, that remember, you are talking to an elected official. You want them to be empathetic to your message.
Yeah.
And so being courteous, polite, and even patient
And concise.
are things. Are good.
Concise.
Absolutely.
These people, their time is very valuable. They're very busy. A lot of times, if you call in, you're probably going to get a staffer. You may occasionally actually get your senator or representative, possibly. I think that's probably fairly rare, though. But if you do, just know their time is very important, and be very concise and to the point, and let them know how you feel.
And let me add one other thing. To those that are able to come to the Capitol,
Yes.
more
Yes.
frequently, you will get a chance to see either the chief of staff or the member if you physically show up in their office.
Yes.
And that is an extremely effective tool because, as we all know, you get how many emails a day? You get a phone call, that elevates it. But if somebody comes by your office and want to talk to you face to face and
Yep,
look at you,
yep.
that's a whole different kind of communication.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you another question. We have a committee hearing coming up at some point that involves sort of all of these bills. I know we don't have an exact date yet. I think you had mentioned we're looking probably a couple weeks out.
It could be up to a couple of weeks. I expect that the Senate will move first.
How much notice will we have?
Unfortunately, they schedule for hearings that Senate Bill 264 has been referred to, which is Chairman Perry's committee, and he's actually the one that's carrying the bills.
What's the name of the committee?
The Senate committee is the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Water, and Rural Affairs.
Got it.
So they will handle the vast majority of those jurisdictional issues. I would expect those hearings are set at 8 a.m. on Mondays, and so you don't have a lot of lead time if you are looking at a citizens lobby type effort.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to get the word out as soon as we hear.
Is this probably the most controversial topic they're dealing with? I imagine the rest of their stuff.
It's controversial for us in this industry.
Yeah.
I think there are other issues. Senator Perry's very active in a lot of important water legislation, and there is a big difference between communities that have water and those that don't.
True.
Urban and rural fights can sometimes be just as contentious as an intra-industry or a prohibitionist versus a regulatory type initiative.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's, but we have to go through these paces, and I think it is important for people who support the industry, who are involved, who help create jobs, for them to engage during the legislative process. And I applaud the work that Hometown Hero is doing to help spearhead this and try to get the industry. Now is the time for the industry to come together, because these threats will not go away, but they can be managed. We can put in place responsible regulations so that not only are consumers protected, but businesses who invest here also are protected.
Yeah, and we're a young industry, but a lot of the people in it, luckily, are have been around, and they're smart business people, and they're driven, and they understand that at the end of the day, we're helping people, and we're helping a lot of people, and so for us, it's really just trying to figure out how do we navigate all this with your help. And by the way, I don't know if a lot of people know this, we're literally here because of you, because of your help, and because of what you've done for us. That's allowed us to exist in Texas. So, for you, we're extremely grateful for what you do and who you are, and the expertise that you bring to the table, and you're an absolute joy to work with. So thank you for everything.
Likewise, I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to keeping everybody informed, because we are in that closing throes of the session.
So Tris, when does the session actually end?
It ends May 29, but who's counting?
Okay, fair enough. Now, last session they had special sessions that came after that was because of the whole power and snowpocalypse and all that stuff.
And that stuff is still percolating out there.
Yeah.
That will also be thrown into the mix in addition to the hemp and the compassionate use initiatives.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, luckily in Texas right now, there's a lot on everybody's plate. This isn't the only issue. And in reality, this is probably a fairly minor issue in relation to a lot of the stuff that the Texas legislature is covering right now. There is way more important stuff than this that they are covering and they're discussing and trying to figure out. And this is, it's just the nature of the beast.
And therein lies the critical importance of having our voice heard among all these other competing priorities.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you for joining us, Tris,
More than welcome.
as always. And please join us next week. We're going to have another amazing video. We're bringing in some guests. And Tris Castañeda with Longbow Partners, a partner there, amazing lobbyist, works with us in Texas, an absolute joy to speak with. Hopefully you guys took away some valuable information, and now you know what you can do to actually help us in this legislative session. I know a bunch of you have been asking for that, and we wanted to give you that information. So now that you have it, please go do something with it, and happy hunting.